Today's discussion is sponsored by Squarespace. Start your free trial today at squarespace.com/Masako to get 10% off your first purchase. The TFS joke in the title may have been overdone for the longest time, but it still applies to this particular discussion. Hey guys, MasakoX here. This week has sort of been a Broly bonanza, as it were. First the what if, and now this? We are really going strong on this guy. When you mention his name amongst the majority of Dragon Ball fans, you're met with an awkward silence as to not knowing how to react to this. There's the confused eye rolls, the stammering. People aren't sure how to react to the character. Granted, he's made a huge impact on the franchise, but at the same time, the whole backstory's been really flawed. I've talked about this a couple of times. People are really conflicted. You know he's so dumb and you keep telling yourself that, but there's just something about the guy that is kind of cool, in a way. Today, we delve into that, as well as all the major flaws and issues, but also the major achievements of the character, as well as exploring briefly about what this new interpretation of Broly could mean for the character as a whole. So let's go back in time to a different world, a time where quite a lot of you might not have even been born. March of 1993. The audience has just witnessed the beginning of the Cell games and the ultimate encounter between the champion Mr. Satan and Perfect Cell, which didn't end too well for the human. The Toei Anime Fair was exhibiting various types of movies to all particular families during the school break. Audiences were introduced to another kind of green villain, although it's not the skin, it's more of the hair. Tints, but you know, the whole purpose of the Dragon Ball movies wasn't necessarily to sell tickets. It was about getting families out during the school break, all getting to socialize with each other, having a little bit of a fun time, 40-50 minute movies, nothing too long, so you get usually double bills with like Sailor Moon and other movies of the day. So that would explain why they're usually so short, but Broly though, that was a bit of a game changer. Most of the movies before had been kind of shorter. This one was like an hour and 10 minutes. This was almost feature length. That was a big deal for the Toei Anime Fair. For people that might not necessarily have known about Dragon Ball all too much, just get stuck in and know, okay, these guys are the good guys, this is the big strong version of that guy, Goku, and they have to fight him. Alright, okay, alright. It's about bringing people in, bums on seats. Even though his Western debut was not for about roughly 10 years or so, the mysterious legend of the Legendary Super Saiyan began to seep into our culture somewhat. This is all thanks to bootleg quality VHS tapes, the beginnings of the internet showing very small images of Broly and people going like, wait, who's that guy? And we obviously not had much access to fan subs, and just seeing this guy is thinking, oh wow, okay. Just the mysteriousness of it all. When I was writing this discussion with Haverok, even he could remember some influences of Broly before his time. Like, he found stickers of Broly, like at bootleg anime stores and like supermarkets, just there for some reason. They probably didn't know who this character was, it was just they got these stickers and they had to sell them. And it couldn't have been any later than 2001 because at the same time there were bootleg stickers of Pokemon Gold and Silver characters, so they got Broly like a good couple of years before Broly was actually official in the American eyes or the Western world. Way before the time we even got the proper pronunciation of Broly. I thought it was Broly for the longest time. Then I heard Chris Sabat's trailer, here's Broly, the Legendary Super Saiyan. To be fair, that trailer made the whole premise pop, especially after movie 7 and Android 13's jibe at Goku for his $30 haircut. He was not the first Saiyan to be in one of those movies, Turles gets that distinction, but just his sheer brute strength and intensity was enough to get people really interested. I mean, everybody liked the Incredible Hulk, so this was just the anime version of it. It was in their Dragon Ball, that was great. He was a villain that was so popular that he got 2 extra sequels, and now he's gonna be coming back for a 4th bite at the apple, albeit with a slight tweak to his aesthetic as well as his premise. All the people that I knew that liked Dragon Ball back when I was a teenager were talking about Broly with some kind of awe and inspiration, kind of like Chuck Norris back in the day, telling Chuck Norris-esque stories really before that whole meme got going. Before Broly, and let's be honest here, for the likes of Funimation and Pioneer, they didn't really see the movies as potential merchandise sellers. They were oddities, curiosities. Oh, these things were made in Japan. They're not that long, we can't put them in theaters. Put them on a tape and maybe sell them for a bit? But when Broly came along, that changed everything. The sensation that was already there, people knew and Funimation knew that this could generate a lot of profit. Broly was turning things up to 11. Heck, he was turning it up to beyond maximum. The sudden burst of hysteria and admiration for this character was palpable. Even I, back when I was 14, 15, was swept up in the hype and awe of this character's presence. This was actually the first movie I saw that Goku didn't have to resort to the Spirit Bomb. I mean, granted, he technically still asked for other people's energy like a Spirit Bomb, but no, this was totally different. But back then, Broly still had a lot of things to prove. But one thing he couldn't prove was how to build a website. Gotta love that segue. But luckily, we can. I've been using Squarespace's easy-to-use tools to create my own personal website so that you can find everything you need to know about my content. All the customization options are quick to find and extremely versatile and intuitive. For those of you who are artists or owners of small businesses and are worried learning how to code, don't be. Squarespace is offering 10% off your first purchase in order to make your new awesome website. Just go to squarespace.com/Masako or click my link in the description to sign up and start creating whatever you desire to display to the world. That's squarespace.com/MASAKO. Enjoy! Much like that segue, I can sense that some of you are unconvinced as to why Broly was so popular, even to this day. Why can such a simple-minded character be so popular? Well, it's just that in a way. Less is more. That's why Broly's a big, strong guy. He's unstoppable. He can punch. Ooh, that's really exciting. Masako, Broly's just a big pile of meat. How does that work? He is inspired by a crying baby, and he has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. Why? Why are you giving him all this credit, Masako? Why? He's only popular with kids because he's super strong and basic. Well, okay, you're kind of right there. He actually was Jiren before Jiren was a thing. He was the embodiment of absolute strength. And remember, the whole purpose of the movies was just to have a temporary obstacle, and that's what he was. The ultimate maximum obstacle for Goku to tackle, just as soon as everybody could use Super Saiyan. And that was the raison d'etre for Broly after that. Every time he appeared in something, it was there because he was popular and he made money. Every single game he was in, even the ones he wasn't really supposed to be in, including Dragon Ball Z sagas. He appeared after you completed the game, and even then he wasn't really good. He couldn't save the game, and when Broly can't save your game, you've got a really bad game. But at the same time, he is a bit of a guilty pleasure in those games because he implies that really you can just go nuts and really just want people. It's a kind of cathartic experience, and I suppose that's why Broly's so appealing. He just gets under your skin, and he appeals to some kind of really instinctive, primal sort of desire to just pound stuff. But let's put all of those aside for now, including the two movies that came after the first one. That first movie is the focus, Broly, the Legendary Super Saiyan. If we look at that first movie, we can tell, just like pretty much every other type of Dragon Ball media, that an interesting premise arises, but just with poor execution. And that was something that GT did in spades. Remember the whole Shadow Dragon saga? At the core of this movie, we have a very troubled character who was scarred by his father as well as the king of his people that basically treated him like he was some kind of freak. But let's just talk about Broly before he becomes the big lummox, when he is in his base form. He's a completely different guy. He is mysterious and calm. And he's a little too calm if you ask me. And you can easily attribute that to the fact that his mind has been basically messed up thanks to all of the magical implements keeping him under control, as well as every single cycle he goes from his base form to his hysterical powered up form. It's all of those things, it really does a lot of damage. But at the same time though, it's really unnerving hearing about this guy who has all of this power, and then when you see him for the first time, it's not really something you would associate with that. It's very unsettling. But what we are really seeing is a husk. This is a Saiyan guy who has been extremely troubled and damaged, and all he is just a walking, talking vessel for some kind of power. There isn't really much of a personality anymore. And really, after his whole power-up in the first movie, we don't see that Broly ever again. In that second movie, he is basically crazy, and the third movie, he's just a blob. But if Broly showed up in the TV series, and I think this is what they're toying with the movie here to bring him into the super world, he might have actually been redeemable, kind of like what we saw with Kale. But since he only just showed up in the movies, that kind of relegates him to just being an unredeemable beast. He cannot grow or develop, not even in multiple movies. Cooler suffered from this as well. Between movie 5 and movie 6, he didn't change, he just became metallic. That fact is a genuine shame because after everything they've gone before in Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, It proved that if you were a villain of Goku, it didn't necessarily mean that you were out for the count forever. You could easily be redeemable and actually end up on the same side. We'd seen it with Piccolo, we were kind of seeing it with Vegeta, and we would go on to see it with the likes of Android 18, Android 17, and Mr. Boo. It can happen. But no, we got no redemption or sympathy for this character, and his childhood must have been way more impactful than Goku or Vegeta's. And yeah, I'm not talking about the whole baby thing, I'm talking about what happened after that. Him and Paragus having to scrounge around the universe, this guy having to control his son without really knowing how to do it unless resorting to magic. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to actually see more of that time instead of just a couple of flashbacks. And I think I've just got to talk about this because it is pretty obvious. Between his normal state and his beefcake state, it's the Jekyll and Hyde situation. The fact that he figuratively and literally in movie 8 rips apart and becomes a whole new being is a really significant and really symbolic way of a character changing, because Broly doesn't just simply power up, he explodes. That's different and unusual, and that scene goes down in the history of Dragon Ball Z as one of the most significant scenes. If Goku wasn't the catalyst for all of this, and instead Vegeta and King Vegeta were, I think Broly would have a much wider appeal, and we'd be much more forgiving for his basic nature and Hulk-like appearance and persona. And just because I'm talking about Broly positively for a moment here, it doesn't mean that I excuse some of the flaws that he has, and they're pretty big flaws. He is a flat, one-dimensional character. He just screams Kakarot. There is no nuance about him. We have to really dig deep to try and find it, and other than that, he is just a big, strong brute just there for a movie. That's essentially what he is. And I think that guilty pleasure complex is something that's beginning to seep in the longer that Broly's been around. I can easily tell that 5 or 10 years ago, with Broly, he would have easily been panned and people would go like, oh my god, Broly, that guy sucks. Nowadays though, he's slowly becoming a bit of a guilty pleasure. Like, you know he's not a good character. You know that he has loads and loads of problems, but dang it man, there's just something about Broly, he grows on you somewhat. But let's just talk about the future, because the future is looking pretty bright for Broly, as you can see here. And yeah, I've got to admit, when I first saw this poster, yeah, from the neck up, he kind of looks a bit like Yamcha had gone absolutely too far and had enough. Back when most of us were children, he was a bit of a playground myth, but as we grew older, we began to try and see and investigate some of the flaws and quirks of the character. And I think Toriyama's aware of this fascination and intrigue. Now that it's not Takao Koyama coming up with a brute and essentially just keeping him the same because he likes him, as he said many times on the record, Toriyama is now in charge of Broly, and he can easily take a look at what made him tick and what people like and what people don't like and come up with his own interpretation. And really, I'm not scared about this. I kind of welcome it. And there is right to be somewhat concerned because Toriyama recently has missed the mark quite a bit, as we found out with the end of Super, but you know what? I think he genuinely wants to try this time. The memory of Battle of Gods is still fresh, and that was fantastic. If he puts as much application into this movie as he did for that movie, I think we're going to be in for quite a fun time. Not to mention the whole aesthetic of Broly, as we've seen in other pictures, it just looks so good. Maybe after all of this, if Broly could actually be likable by the majority of fans, we could maybe move on from the past and look to the bright future of Dragon Ball with Broly there, and it's implying that he's part of the Frieza Force, and this might integrate Broly with Frieza, and yeah, I'm really excited to see more. Let's just hope Toei rises up to the challenge. So what do you guys think? Are you still excited to see Broly's new movie? Or have you just given up and you're not going to watch it out of principle? Leave a comment below and let's get this discussion going. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Until the next one, be sure to like and subscribe. Catch you later!